With over 120 ski areas across the Midwest and plenty of price points for season passes, how does one choose which to call home? Let's talk about it. What's going on, Midwest skiers and riders? Matthew Zaransky with MidwestSkiers.com, and today we are covering a topic that I have been dealing with for well over 10 seasons now. Which season pass do I buy, and where should I establish a home ski hill? Since learning to ski at the age of 2, I have been a pass holder at over 10 different ski areas across the Midwest, and I have learned a lot about what I value in choosing where I want to be a pass holder. I picked up a lot of this during my wife's career, as we were forced to move every 3 to 4 years since 2012. So I had to go through this process several times, and some of these decisions had to be made without even being on site. That being said, this video is in no way definitive, and it's going to vary greatly case by case, but for me, it boils down to 4 major points: location, price and perks, terrain and vibe, and length of season. We'll go through each of these individually, and I'll give you some insights on each one and how important they were to me in the process. But before we do that, if you enjoy ski content such as this, do me a huge favor and hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you can stay up to date on everything going on in the Midwest ski scene, especially as we edge closer and closer to the season here. But let's get started with my biggest factor at play: location. Now, I know everyone's not going to agree with me on this one, but location is by far the most important element for me when selecting a home hill. This will vary skier to skier, but I have found that the closer that you live to a ski area, the more often you will use your pass, ultimately giving you more value. Of course, you have to enjoy your time at said area, otherwise no matter how often you visit, you won't feel like you got a good value. However, all things being equal, location will likely be one of the biggest hurdles when considering a home area. So what's the ideal distance then? It's obviously going to be all subjective, but for me it comes down to 3 separate zones: less than 30 minutes, less than 1 hour, and less than 3 hours, all with a little bit of buffer on each side. In my experience, if a ski area is less than 30 minutes away, people can spontaneously decide to go skiing. When I used to live in Ohio, where Boston Mills was like 20 minutes away, same with Tyrol Basin when I lived on the west side of Madison, I would just keep my gear with me, and I would often just randomly decide to pop out for an hour or two. This was especially true when weather and conditions were great. Rough day at work, just swing by the local hill to blow off some steam. Once you approach the 1 hour mark, things become more of a thought out process. It's still close enough to take advantage of your pass regularly, but you have to coordinate things a little bit more. My best example here is when I lived in Columbus, Ohio, and was a pass holder at Mad River Mountain. It took about 50 minutes or so to get out there, which was just enough for me to have to plan my ski day. I would continue to watch the weather and go after work or for short stints, but it took more planning and forethought than just heading out there completely spontaneously. Then you get to the under 3 hour mark, which requires advanced plans. This would fall into your weekend warrior type skiers and snowboarders who would rather use their pass somewhat less, but travel further to get bigger and better terrain. For most people, the travel time would shut down any room for spontaneous trips. And of course, I have an example for this one as well. When I used to live in Chicago, I was a pass holder at Cascade Mountain for a few years, and we would often go up for weekends and occasional day trips on days that I was off school. This trip was about 2.5 hours, but at the time, my family was more focused on having an experience for everybody with more terrain rather than regular reps. But that brings us to our second factor at play: price and perks. For many people, this may be their number one determining factor when selecting a home hill or pass, but luckily passes come in a variety of price points, and many ski areas even offer different pass products depending on how you will use them. Generally speaking, I have found 3 main price points. The first price point being under $400. It's a relatively low entry point for skiers and snowboarders, which makes the commitment up front less involved, and some of these passes might even be purchased even if you don't plan on using them. The best example here would be Mount Bohemia's pass, where the majority of pass holders never actually redeem a boho ticket, but they might use some of its great perks. More on that a little bit later. At this price point, it's a pretty easy decision if you're starting to become more serious about skiing and snowboarding. You can usually pay off the pass with just a handful of visits, And even if you just get tied up and don't make it out as much as you thought you would, you're not out a huge sum of money. And this was me right out of college in 2013 when I took my first full-time job. Tyrrell Basin had a great deal, $235 for a full pass, and it was really close and super affordable, so it just made sense. I happened to be working 2 jobs at the time, so I knew I wasn't going to be able to get out a ton, but at that price point, I wasn't super concerned. If I used it, great. If not, the pricing wasn't too bad for me to feel like I lost out. But in our next category, that might change a bit for you. The range of $400 to $700 requires more thought and planning, but for the right people, many of these passes can be of tremendous value. This price point is beginning to get a bit high, especially for casual skiers and snowboarders. However, these more expensive passes are often offered from larger areas with more terrain and infrastructure. This price point seems to be the sweet spot for those that are serious about skiing and snowboarding, but are not looking to take out a loan for their winter adventures. Given that the pass prices are directly correlated with window ticket prices, these passes can still often be paid off after just a handful of visits, making this a solid price point for those wanting to experience the bigger and better across the Midwest. Now, the downside is that if you don't use it as much as you hope to, you'll be out a lot more money. This makes the jump to becoming a pass holder a bit more complicated, but not nearly as complicated as our next price point, $700 plus. When you enter the world of $700 plus season passes in the Midwest, you're basically jumping into a multi-resort pass. This would include products like the Icon Pass, Epic Pass, and Legendary Pass, and could even include buying a local pass and adding on an Indie Pass for those resorts that offer it. From my experience at this price point, you either hit extreme value or extreme loss. These passes offer plenty of potential value, giving you access to ski areas all over the country and sometimes even the world, but sometimes that narrative is the only thing that actually sells you. If you are dedicated to traveling, these passes offer some of the best value in the business. Having the ability to ski your local Midwest ski area and then use that same pass to go out to the Rockies and ski areas like Vail, Jackson Hole, or Tamarack is something that would have been absolutely unbelievable 10 to 15 years ago. But here's the thing. This is all perceived value. It doesn't actually become real value until those redemptions are used, something that I always like to remind people when spending nearly $1,000 on a pass. These passes work extremely well when you have a planned trip or have serious intentions of traveling to one of these expensive ski areas. That one trip can easily pay for the entire pass, but you must commit to going before the season starts, and that's kind of the whole model here. Whether it's a low tide season or a record snowfall year, that money is already spent. So there's a bit of risk reward here. Back in 2018, I was in this exact situation. I had a trip planned to Jackson Hole and thought, well, I'll pick up the Icon Pass. At the time, it was $990, and I thought I would use some days at Snowshoe, West Virginia, and then some days at Boyne and the Highlands. But working a full-time job, it just never happened. Daily tickets at the time were $150 at Jackson Hole, so my 6 days of skiing would have been $900 window price. However, if I would have bought the 6-day ticket, it would have been $713, saving me over $280 over the full Icon Pass. You get my point here. These passes can be great if you dedicate time to travel and use them fully, but if you have a full-time job, kids, other responsibilities, you need to be realistic with how often you're going to actually use the pass. But we haven't discussed the other element at play here, and that's the perks. In recent years, ski areas across the country have joined forces to strengthen their season pass offerings by giving pass holders additional days and discounts at other ski areas. And some of these perks can be super minor, such as 10% off food at your local hill, but some can be massive. Take the Ski Cooper Pass in Colorado, for example. This pass has massive perks thanks to its reciprocal partners and membership in the Freedom Pass and Powder Alliance. Pass holders can get 3 days of skiing at over 50 ski areas worldwide, making their prices much easier to digest. This would also maybe encourage someone to make Ski Cooper their home hill over some of the others in the area. Perks are always changing year to year, so as you begin your research, check out those updated perks and certainly don't underestimate them when shopping for a season pass. Another thing not to underestimate when choosing a home hill is the terrain and the vibe. As I've continued to mention throughout this video, you have to use and enjoy your pass in order to get good value out of it. That said, pick a home area that will give you the terrain that is best suited for you and what you enjoy. If you enjoy riding park, make sure they have a solid park setup. If you enjoy intermediate groomers, make sure that it checks that box. If you just want to make hot laps after work, make sure they have hours that accommodate that. Of course, you'll always be somewhat limited to what your region and area offers, but if you don't enjoy your time out there, you're going to get no value out of your pass. The best way to do this is to ski the areas that you're considering to see how much fun you're having there before making the decision. However, not everybody is in that situation. When I moved to both Akron and Columbus, I didn't have the ability to ski the area prior because I was relocating across states with only a couple of months' notice. So here's a few tips for gauging terrain without actually skiing it. Start by Google Earthing the ski area and look at pitches, heights, and different pods to understand what the terrain will look like. It's not perfect, but it'll give you a good starting point, and then you can compare it to another area that you've already skied to get a good idea of what you're working with. Next, if possible, go drive by the area during the off-season or attend one of their off-season events. When we moved to Ohio, I did just this. I drove by a few of my options and got a really good feel for the terrain and what the area offered. Just don't trespass on private property. Lastly, ask around, but be cautious here. Groups and forums can be a great place to get insights on ski areas that you haven't been to. Just make sure to be specific about your question. Remember, better or best is very subjective. Start by giving the group a quick description of what you're looking for and what you like in a ski area, then give specific areas that you're looking at and ask which would be suited for you. Now, gauging vibe is kind of tough, but equally important for a lot of people. Becoming an active pass member at a ski area is basically like joining a family. You're going to run into the same people each time you visit and probably hanging out at the bar during operate. So you're going to want a ski area that matches your vibe. Maybe you're a family man who wants a ski area with a family-friendly vibe, or maybe a straight out of college skier who wants a more lively scene. There is all of that at ski areas across the Midwest, and some ski areas even have different vibes depending on when and where you go. Vibe could also include certain amenities that are important to you and your ski group. Are high-speed lifts important to you? How about amenities outside of skiing and snowboarding? Another element is landscape. Are the runs tree-lined? Do you feel like you're out in nature rather than at a training facility? These are all major elements of the skiing experience, and preferences can vary greatly case by case. Most ski areas are built off of vibe in the Midwest because we lack so much vertical, so don't underestimate this factor. And certainly don't write a ski area off that might have slightly worse stats without factoring in the people that make the ski area what it is. Alright, so you made it this far and you think you have the perfect home hill picked out, but this last question can really be a big factor when deciding value: season length. Ski areas across the Midwest vary quite a bit in terms of season length. And some of that is strategic, while some of that is dependent on their snowmaking capacity. If you want to get out as much as possible, you're going to want a ski area that opens early in the season and closes late. This will give you the most opportunity to use your pass and, of course, get your money's worth out of it. For context, head on over to midwestskiers.com/openings to see all of the opening and closing data ranging over the past several seasons. You'll see averages and get a good idea of when those areas you're considering open and close for the season, so you can gauge how many days you can get in each year. Oh, holy cow, that was a lot of information, but I hope this video helps break down some of the key things to look at and consider when searching for your ski home here in the Midwest. Of course, there's always going to be personal preference when making this decision, and things might even change for you as your skiing and riding evolves. But what's the most important element to you, and where do you call home? Drop it in the comments below. But until next time, I hope everybody has a great week. Pray for that snow, and I'll see you out there.